Hi everyone. Today we have Cathy Davis from Davis Creative, and she helps you author your book. So let's welcome Cathy. And Cathy, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started?
Oh, I'd love to. So 2003 in December, I was downsized. I was at a major financial institution as a creative director for their trust division. And I could not wait to get out the door after I learned that my department was being downsized. So nothing against the financial institution. I was just ready to work for myself. So that's when I started doing independent consulting. And my husband joined me when he was downsized in 2008. So that was 5 years later. And I've been doing this for the last 15 years. When we first initially started, we were a generic branding services agency. And over the years, we've had to pivot several times to keep up with technology or people moving from printing to technology. And we now find ourselves in a position where 95% of what we do is we use the power of publishing to help our authors, our clients, grow their businesses. So we help them find their voice, tell their story, and learn how to use that power to grow their business.
Great. Well, you mentioned about pivoting, and that is just such an important thing, to be agile enough with your business that you can pivot when you need to pivot.
It's a scary spot to be in if you're not used to it. I can say I now almost kind of enjoy the pivot. It's kind of like thinking, okay, what can I do now? What's next? What am I not seeing that I can maybe be doing to be more profitable or be more conscious of what our clients are really asking for? And that tends to initiate a pivot if I stop and listen to what my clients are really asking for.
Okay. So let's just talk about writing a book. So why should I, if I'm a business owner or an individual even, why would I want to write a book? Or why should I write a book?
I can tell you that the market is very saturated right now with a lot of people out there writing their books. It's very easy to get your book as an independent publisher up on Amazon. The trick there is, though, to get it up on Amazon and have it look as if it has been professionally produced, because just like your business card, your logo, years ago we used to remember the old 3-panel brochures? I don't know anybody. Every now and then I'll still see one, but most people have moved beyond that. Every piece of information that you put out as a small business owner tells your story. And a book is just another way to do it. It doesn't have to be a lengthy book. It could be a much smaller version, maybe less than 100 pages, pocket size. But what that book does, it gives you a chance to, what I call, put your stake in the ground. This is my message. This is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what makes me bigger, better, smarter, different than all those other people that do what I do. And it helps you stand out in a crowd.
Well, I know that this area can be kind of fearful for people. So there's a lot of options out there, right?
There are a lot of options. The one we've already mentioned is the independent self-publishing. You can upload your file into Amazon.com, pick a photo, create a cover, pick a font, type out your title and your subtitle, hit a button, and zoom. It's done. At the opposite extreme of that is the traditional publisher. And here in the US, there's probably a half dozen or so traditional publishers that still exist, that are any reputable background. And the ones that have been around for decades, if not over 100 years. So those people are all represented by agents. And the only way to get into those traditional publishers, say if you think of John Grisham or J.K. Rowling, who did the Harry Potter series, or any of those well-known authors, they all have agents. And so those agents will take a piece of your profit once your book gets published. And by the time you get your royalty, so let's say J.K. Rowling probably gets somewhere between 50 cents to $1 for each book that she sells. Now, because she's at such a high profile type of author, it's going to be closer to that $1 range Plus, she's going to get an upfront fee to write the next book because she set a precedent for what her stories do and how much, ultimately those publishing companies, they want to make money too. They want to stay in business. So they're going to follow those authors who are very popular. Now, in between those two extremes, the do-it-yourself and the traditional publishers, you have what I call is just a kind of a murky, muddy water kind of pond. And you'll find a lot of people who may have published one book themselves who are now calling themselves publishing consultants. You'll also find what's known as vanity press, where I grew up in the printing industry, and all the printing companies are trying to find new ways to stay afloat and stay in business. And a lot of them have started calling themselves publishing companies. What they're really doing is they're still printing companies, but they're printing your books for you. Now, with the do-it-yourself model back on Amazon, you don't have to buy a bunch of books up front. It's print on demand. You only have to buy what you want. If you want 10 or 12 or 100, that's all you have to buy. In that middle kind of murky water arena where the printers may be trying to sell you books, their whole goal is to sell you thousands of books. And we always tell our authors, please don't buy 1,000 books unless you know you already have those 1,000 books sold. If you're working at going to a convention to speak, you're the keynote speaker, you have breakout sessions, or perhaps every person who is attending your session gets a book when they sign up and register for the event, then most certainly you want to make sure you have books for everybody who needs them at that event. And it may be 100 or it may be 1,000, depending on how large of an audience you attract. But it's very much a murky water in between the two well-known entities of do-it-yourself or traditional publishing. Now, what has cropped up in that murky water, and I will say I like to call myself in that pond of clarity, where we call ourselves concierge publishing consultants. And what that means is no matter where an author is in their process, they may come to us with an idea. They may come to us with scribbles on napkins. We've had people do that, yes. Just like the CPAs that get receipts and napkins. Yeah, we've had notes on napkins and post-it notes. We help them put all the ideas together. Sometimes they come to us with a manuscript already complete, and we can help them get that book designed and the book published, not only on Amazon, but also through distribution with one of the traditional publishers, through Ingram Publishing. And what that does is it gives them access not only to the world of Amazon, but another 40,000 distribution points around the globe. So their books are automatically not necessarily going to show up in bookstores, but every bookstore on the planet who uses Ingram as a distributor, which is about 95% of the bookstores, will be able to access that book for them.
Oh,
so,
awesome.
So what we try and do is we help our authors figure out what's the best process for them. And we give them options at every step along the way, and then they get to kind of pick the path that they choose to go down.
Okay, so the benefit of someone, going through someone like you with a book concierge versus publishing in themselves, what are the benefits there?
Well, I had an interesting conversation this morning with a potential new client who asked the same question, so it's very timely. She had done a fantastic job of designing her book, getting it set up in Microsoft Word, which I avoid at all costs because I don't like Microsoft Word. I think anybody who works in it should be up for sainthood because it's not the easiest program out there. And if they can figure it out, more power to them. But she had a well-designed book. She had her author page up on Amazon. And the trick, though, was that she said, my friends told me about Ingram, but I just didn't know how to do it. And I kept hearing that there was all these backroom arguments between Ingram and Amazon, and I just figured I better stay away from that because I didn't know enough about it. And therein lied the key phrase, was we've been doing this for over 10 years. Our first author, for one of our clients about 10 years ago, was the first author who did a self-published book. And we've learned a lot along the way. So yes, there are some backroom techniques to avoid getting caught between any tussles, so to speak, between Amazon and Ingram, because they see each other as competitors. And there's a certain process that we follow in order to avoid a lot of that nitpicking stuff that we don't want to get us or our clients involved with. And so we have figured out the easiest and most effective route, which will maximize the royalty that the author receives. So because of the way that she has her book set up, Amazon is actually keeping more of her royalty than if she had gone through somebody like us. We can show her ways that she can actually keep more of that money in her own pocket.
More than that $1 a book?
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. So, if you're independently published through Amazon, you will typically see between $2 to $3, maybe $4 per book versus the $1 or 50 cents that J.K. Rowling is. Now, the scale, you kind of think, J.K. Rowling is selling millions, if not billions of books. So it worked out well for her.
Yeah, a little bit different. So how else can I look at writing a book and how do I get a return on that investment? Be it, hiring somebody like you to help me get it done. I'm going to say it's probably more professional and things like that, but are there any other benefits to someone doing that?
Well, one of the things there's two things we always tell our authors. One is, please don't plan your retirement around the sale of your book.
Right.
Because you're not going to go very far. Two is, it's not about how well your book sells, it's how well your book sells you. So if you think about a metaphor for publishing your book, if you publish your book and you get this big cupcake, and the sprinkles on the top is what Amazon can do for you. And everything else underneath that cupcake, either you have to do or we or somebody like us would do for you. And I liken it very much to, if your daughter's getting married, are you going to be the one that was going to make her wedding cake at the risk of whatever your daughter might say about that? Or are you going to hire someone to do it for you? Now, if you're a professional pastry chef, by all means, go forth, make that cake. It will be fabulous, I'm sure. Same with books. If you are a professional book designer, editor, and you know your stuff, then go forth. Please do it. Like the woman this morning, she had done a very good job, but there were just a few little details that maybe she hadn't thought about that might speak volumes to your reader. After all, you're putting your brand out there and you want to make sure that it looks professional, that it's been professionally edited and professionally designed, because it speaks of who you are and what you do.
Right. So let me ask you, for those who don't know, Cathy Davis, you guys have done my book before, and I've been involved in. Why don't you talk about some of the complementation books that you do?
Right. So there's several ways that you can create a book. One of the books that we're working on right now, a gentleman, he's a speaker and a trainer, and he's been a prolific blogger, that's hard to say real fast, for a good 10 years. And what we did with him is we helped him organize his blog into four blog ideas into four main categories. And over the last 6 months, he's been pulling blogs down and putting them in his categories, and we've helped him create an organization to his message so that he already has the content. He didn't have to go out and recreate it. We've just helped him put it together and organize it so that it makes sense to a reader. And then we bring in an editor behind him to make sure that it flows and is easy to read. I don't know if when I write my blog, we sometimes write blogs just like we would speak and talk. And it's different from when you read. You do want them to hear your voice as they're reading your book, but you also want to make sure you got your commas and things like that in the right place. Now, one of the other ways, I can talk a little bit about your book as well as our friend John Ayers, in that sometimes people will pick a number and they may say, 52, was yours 52 productivity tips?
Strategies, yeah.
Strategies, yeah. And where And then you break those down into categories also so that it makes sense. If someone's searching for a specific answer, they can go to your table of contents, or they can go to your index or in the back of the book, and they can target in. And so there becomes more of a reference manual. So they keep out near them anyway on their desk. The other gentleman, John, when he did his was all about, how to make a sales call and how to make that sales call effective for you. Now, we've had some people, yours made sense because it was 52. We have some people that will do 12 because it's 12 months. We've had one woman in the past year who just picked, she had 47. And I said, okay, well, we're really close to 52. Can you come up with 5 more? No, she couldn't. So we kept it at 47. But it was your guide to, hers was a career, how to change your career and be successful in your next job. So it was 47 techniques. So no matter what number, some people will pick their favorite number. So that's one way to compile it. Is that similar? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. And then tell us about your new project that you're working on.
So we have, as I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about pivot, if I actually stop and listen to what people are asking for, which is exactly what happened this time. Over the past 6 months, I'm a member of NSA, National Speakers Association, which is also where I know you. And a couple of our friends had approached me and said, I really would like to do this little tiny itty bitty mini book, something that doesn't cost very much. It's not very large, something that I can give away when I speak. And lo and behold, one of our friends brought me an article that they had seen about it. And a couple of weeks ago, we were at a picnic, and one of the NSA members said, oh yeah, I went to this great speaker last week at convention, and she was talking about this and that and that. And it just really got my brain spinning. And so we came up recently, just really last weekend. The title of our new program is going to be Dynamite Books. So it's small in size, a tiny book, but impact huge in power. And it's 100 pages or less. We have 2 formats that people can choose from. One will be the top tips format, and the other will be more of a content-based format where perhaps someone is much more vocal than they are in terms versus the bullet points that you might find in a tips book. These are used a lot of ways by speakers and trainers. I know one of our clients, she will put, if she goes to speak to a crowd, let's say there's 50 people in the audience, the first 2 rows are usually the ones that people avoid. She will put one of those tiny books in each of those chairs and say that, if you want a tiny book, you got to come sit up front. Of course, people will try and grab one and run to the back, and she always turns the focus onto them to pull them back up. So it's a great tool for getting your message out there. It's a great short read when someone has an airplane trip or a commute home where they can, read a book if they're not driving. And so it's a less expensive way. It can also be done in anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. Typically, a project, when we're doing a book between 100 and 200 pages, can last anywhere from 8 weeks to 8 months to a year, depending on how quick that author will move. We can get it done in 8 weeks if we push them, if the book is already written. These tiny books, we can actually help you put it together between 6 and 8 weeks.
Wow, that's a really short time frame, and the chances of being able to do that and getting that done, it can be more manageable for some people.
Well, and as we come out of the summer months, I see a lot of speakers and trainers who will have more events where they're speaking and training between September and May, because that allows, and so they're really thinking now is the time. I have one that says, I have an event coming up in the middle of October. Can you help me get something out by then? And we're going to push you to do it, but yeah, we can get it out by then. So.
Okay, great. Well, let's take a step back and just, when you think about your business, what is some of the most challenging aspects of, running your own business?
In the beginning, I was the solopreneur, so I was doing everything myself. And one of the lessons I've had to learn is learning to delegate, learning to trust that the person I'm just handing it over to is going to take care of it. And then the other challenge that we had is when my husband joined me, we both had worked in corporate environments, and we both had people on our staff that could help us do things. And when you work for yourself, you don't have that. You automatically just either do something or eventually find people to do it for you. So there was a transition period after he joined, and we're in our 11th year now, that he was able to join me in working for ourselves. And there was a transition period where it took us a while to realize that he was waiting for either his assistant, his project manager, or his secretary to tell him what to do next, or hand him the log of what needed to be done for that week or that day, or the next phone call to say, okay, quite often in the marketing and communication industry, not quite often, always, everything is deadline driven and everything is based upon deadlines. And when you're in a situation where you create your own deadlines, you've got to learn to do that. So that was an opportunity for us to learn how to do that together. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's just like anything, around productivity too. If you don't set some deadlines and hold yourself to them, it's hard to get those things accomplished. So if you had one piece of advice, what would that be?
With respect to books or running my own business?
Let's talk about books, since that's what you're basically talking about today.
So one piece of advice for books, and it will go back to, it's not about how well your book sells, it's how well your book sells you. And the power behind that is that it motivates authors. Don't sit back and wait for your book to sell on Amazon, or don't sit back and wait for your book to sell at the back of the room. It's the power of creating the event around the book, or creating the talk, or selling the book at the back of the room, or driving traffic to your website to a specific landing page where you have a free download, perhaps 1 or 2 chapters of your book that gets them interested in your book, so then they take that next step. A book is merely that. It's just part of that sales funnel to help someone learn to know, like, and trust you, not only as an author, but as a business owner, and want to do business with you in other ways.
Yeah, and I think it just gives you a little bit more credibility. It kind of, I look at it just as a marketing tool. I really don't look at it to make money on it. I give way more books away than I ever sold. Yeah. So before we wind up here, why don't you tell the audience how they can find out more about you or contact you?
So we've had our URL for a long time, and I'm really proud that we got it when we did, but it's Davis, real easy, daviscreative.com. That's the easiest way to find me. The other way is Cathy with a C, L Davis on Facebook, and it's also Davis Creative on Facebook, either one of those. And then on LinkedIn, it's Cathy L. Davis. So I add the L because there are a lot of Cathy Davises in this world, and occasionally we do get confused about who does what.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for your time today and sharing your wisdom, and maybe getting a few more people excited about writing a book for that, to benefit themselves and their business.
Thank you, Cathy, for having me be a part of this today.